The last one was fun, so why not do another? 5 more anime deaths that made me cry. Apparently I cry a lot at these. Same caveat as before, it doesn't matter how old I was when I was seeing this character die. If I saw them die when I was 5, still counts. So, let's jump in. There are deaths in JoJo as a series that are pretty much collectively agreed upon as being just straight up depressing. Deaths like Narancia, Jotaro, Caesar, Jonathan, Bruno, Gyro. Spoiler alert, by the way. However, there is a character that the fandom has always been kind of split on. Both loved and hated. A character that I've always personally enjoyed. And that is Shigechi. Just look at him. How can you not like this adorable little Dodoria cosplayer? He's got a lot of likeable traits. He's a major hustler, always grinding. He's a straight up player. And his stand, Harvest, is really, really strong, despite being seemingly kind of weak on the surface. He's basically just a bumbling, impressionable goofball, but let's talk about his actual death. Throughout part 4, despite the fact that there is a serial killer on the loose, not many people overall die. Well, not at least people aren't revived through bites the dust anyway. I mean, Keicho dies, Aya dies, but not really many people who are ridiculously significant die, in my opinion. Except for this round boy, Shigechi. His death is impactful for a couple reasons. Despite how much of an absolute little fuck-knuckle Shigechi can be, he's just kind of an impressionable idiot. As he's dying, he's covered in blood, he has most of his insides turned to soup from Killer Queen. The girls are the closest people near him and have the opportunity to help him, just kind of ignore him because he's ugly, which is kind of fucked up. His final actions, despite this, were noble. He aided in catching Kira by managing to get a button off his shirt, off his jacket or whatever, before Kira changed his identity. And all the while, as Shigechi's dying, he's both internally and externally screaming about how he must protect his mother from this evil serial killer. This little homie just wanted to protect his mum. Even if David Bowie is chasing him in the background, he just wants to protect his mum, and he's a noble little creature. I've always been a big fan of Naruto, despite its flaws. One of its big flaws is, despite the fact that children are literally conscripted as soldiers, not a lot of people who are like integral to the plot die a lot of the time. Well, not anyone important, but this problem gets even worse when we see the Edo Tensei technique, which kind of nullifies death a lot. So when a likable character does actually die before we see any Edo Tensei, it's quite heart-wrenching and memorable. So, anyway, who was the most impactful death for me? Was it Neji? No, he was kind of cool in old school Naruto, but in Shippuden, he literally does nothing. Was it Obito? I personally really liked Obito, but the sadness of his death is contradicted by the literal hundreds, if not thousands of corpses he created for the Eye of the Moon plan, and it's kind of contradicted with the fact that Naruto's last line about him is he's a pretty cool guy, so nah. Shisui was kind of cool, but his death literally has 3 different versions, and in each they're very different, and they're all still kind of goofy in most of them. He has a slightly different death in the light novel, the game, and the anime, so no, not Shisui, even though I really like him. For me, personally, it was Zabuza. One of the first major deaths we actually see in the series is Zabuza. I mean, look at him. Zabuza's an actual just menace. He's apparently managed to kill a Kage at one point. He's one of the 7 swordsmen. He's one of the few 7 swordsmen who actually use a sword. Like, seriously, what the hell is this? But the moments after Haku's death feel a lot more poignant than other similar comments in the series, as this is one of the first times we ever see talk no jutsu, so it didn't feel like absolute bullshit yet. This hadn't become a trope in Naruto where he talks to the villain to make them feel sad and think about their evil ways. No, we hadn't really seen that before, so it hits a lot harder. We see Haku dead on the ground as Naruto berates Zabuza for not feeling anything towards Haku after his death, calling him scum, mirroring Obito, ironically enough. Then we just see that shot of Zabuza turning around. It gets me every time, man. And then shortly after this we see Zabuza charge through a horde of enemies with just a kunai in his mouth, which is pretty badass. He kills Gato, don't worry about him, he's not really important. Then Kakashi helps him die besides Haku. Yes, later both Haku and Zabuza are revived through Edo Tensei, however it's so later on in the series, it's more wholesome than annoying. I mean, all Kakashi and Zabuza really talk about is how Naruto grew up. It's quite wholesome. But when I was a sprog seeing this for the first time, kid me was really feeling it for Zabuza. There's been an awful lot of shonen in both this video and the previous, so let's change that a little bit. Take a trip down memory lane with me as I ask you, do you remember Angel Beats? Angel Beats as a series is written to be as depressing as possible given its setting. Every character has a tragic backstory, none of these characters got a happy ending in their first life, so that's why they're here in purgatory. Whilst a lot of people would say the ending is the saddest death, I'd say it's technically not a death, since it's more so just Canada moving on. Though it's still moving, it doesn't fit the criteria, pretty much. For me, when I first watched it, the character whose backstory and death made me the most sad was Otanashi, the main guy. Ironically enough, when we start the series, he doesn't even remember his own backstory. But when he finally does remember it, god damn, this man cannot catch a break. He starts off by working multiple jobs just to buy books for his deathly ill sister. Then she gets super ill, dies, which is a great start. He then decides to become a doctor after realising the only time he actually felt happy and the only reason he kept on living was to hear his sister say thank you. And he thinks maybe he can help people and they can say thank you to him too. He grinds even more jobs, gets through school, gets into a nice medical school. Then on the way to the entrance ceremony, the train he's on gets trapped in a tunnel, which is blocked from both sides. He's stuck inside with a group of injured survivors with little to no food or water, and on top of that, he is seriously injured. So he's pretty much carrying everyone here. The more and more time passes, all the rations run out and people left trapped in the tunnel are all just slowly dying. In a final bid to make sure that Otanashi helps as many people as possible, he begins to pull out his wallet and sign his organ donation card. And in doing so inspires everyone around him to do the same, allowing everyone's death in this tunnel to have some meaning, and not simply be a waste of life. Then we hear people starting to open up the tunnel and remove the rubble, freeing people. The trapped victims begin to jump for joy, and as one of them begins to thank Otanashi for saving everyone's life, he doesn't respond. His life was just a constant stream of unfortunate events and him trying to do something good to counter them. His sister's dying, he gets her some presents and works a million jobs to afford them. Sister died, well, I'll be a doctor so I won't let anyone else die. Everyone's trapped in a tunnel, I'll save them. Then he inspired them to give their organs away, and then he dies. And as a reward for that, he gets to live confused in purgatory for a while. Out of all the depressing ass deaths in Angel Beats, this was the one I really remembered the most. Kamina. There's only a couple deaths in Gurren Lagann. Apologies for the crusty looking footage. For some reason I can't find a decent HD version. Anyway, despite how sad it was, you know when I'm talking about impactful deaths in Gurren Lagann, I'm obviously not talking about Kitan, unfortunately. No. Everyone knows the big death in Gurren Lagann is the one and only Kamina. Kamina's death is one of those deaths in anime that pretty much everyone in the show at least felt a little something about. Some people might have just made a frown a little bit, but with me instinctively, I remember watching the episode where Kamina dies and seeing how the show kind of messes with you by making you think Kamina is going to live. Like, he gets up after being slashed and stabbed and ripped apart. We beat the villain, so all is good, until the audio stops and he just dies. Yes, that's sad, straight up depressing, and the fallout of Kamina's death is just as sad in my opinion. It felt strangely real to me. When a person dies, you kind of put them on a pedestal and paint them in your own mind to be without fault, and that's kind of what was displayed greatly here after Kamina's death, where Simon describes stories where Kamina was this fearless leader who showed him how to drill for the heavens, whilst we get a recount from Yoko about how Kamina described how he was just as scared as Simon, but Simon inspired him to go forward. The way Simon reacted to Kamina's death is understandable. He becomes a recluse, acts out, and spends all day making statues of Kamina, thinking that he can never live up and be the person Kamina was to fill his place. And then he grows and realises he isn't his brother, he's his own person, and only needs to believe in himself. It's quite wholesome. Kamina's death was only 8 episodes in a Gurren Lagann, but despite that, Kamina was such an interesting and cool character that when people think of Gurren Lagann, they think about Kamina and his death. There is a big but to his death, however. His death in the dub, to me, is 10 times more hard-hitting than in the sub. I just feel like all the dialogue chosen for the dub suits Kamina's character so much better than in the sub. Like, for example, what sounds better?
Simon, open the hatch! Let's see you grit those teeth!
His death, while allowing all the cast to grow because of it, as well as having a lasting impact on the future of the world of Gurren Lagann, still hit me pretty hard when I first saw it when I was younger. And it probably still hit a lot of weebs pretty hard, as it's one of the most memorable anime deaths, in my opinion. And on top of that, it's one of the most wholesome things of all time when Kamina and Simon talk for one last time. It's just, this interaction is just so nice. I don't think I've ever mentioned One Piece on this channel besides this single short, but despite the fact I'm a decently big One Piece fan. I mean, I'm fully caught up with the manga as far as I know. Anyway, One Piece, due to it being so ongoing, has quite a good few deaths throughout. So out of everyone who dies in One Piece, who made me cry, It's pretty basic and a common answer among One Piece fans, but Corazon is just such a goddamn likeable character. So when he sacrificed himself for Law, it got to me. For a bit of context, Corazon, or Rosinante, is Doflamingo's brother, despite the fact his design is inspired by a clockwork orange. He's pretty chill overall, even though when we first saw him, he literally threw Law out the window, with the reasoning that it was to protect him. This flashback with Corazon isn't really that long, but with everything we learn about him, it makes him this likeable and tragic character. We know of him, unfortunately, being related to Doflamingo, who murdered the two's parents because he's Doflamingo, as well as him being an undercover marine for years to try and bring down the Doflamingo family. And as a result, he acts mute in front of all members of the family. Yet, despite that, we see him cry for Law. We see him do everything in his power to get the Ope Ope no Mi to save his life, which he does, successfully. But unfortunately for him, Virgo appears, messing everything up. Doflamingo shoots Corazon, but for Law to live, he needs to stay alive so that his own devil fruit will remain active. Corazon's devil fruit will make anything silent that he touches. Corazon holding on to life will make Law's wails and cries silent so he can escape. The thing that I really liked about Corazon's death is that it's not forgotten by those it's effective. For example, Corazon in Spanish means heart. What does Law go on to name his crew? The Heart Pirates. As well as him just having a massive heart tattoo across his chest to honour him, and then all throughout the Dressrosa arc, Law's hoodie on the back has just says Corazon on it. He was just a cool dude who tried to do the right thing and then just got shot to bits for it. There is a pattern with all these characters' deaths, but it's a bit more out there and not as concrete as the last 5 anime deaths, but I'll let you guess what you think the major similarity between all these deaths are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever. The pattern is that they all have to hang on to dear life for as long as possible to enable other characters to survive in the story for longer. For example, it's a bit of a reach, but all these characters' deaths were sacrificial lambs in a way. Shigechi survived for as long as he could after having most of his internal organs being blown apart and just destroyed by Killer Queen, and still managed to hold on for as long as possible and managed to get one of the killer's buttons to Josuke and Okuyasu before he died, ensuring that they would have had a clue to actually find the killer, as it was their only lead at the time. Zabuza is similar. He survived on sheer willpower and killed Gato to avenge Haku, but this also protected Team 7, who was tasked with protecting the bridge builder Tazuna. If Gato wasn't killed here, this horde would have attacked Team 7 to get to the bridge builder. So he saved Team 7's asses from fighting this horde after they'd been majorly fatigued from fighting Zabuza and Haku, so they would have died there. Otanashi lived for as long as possible, helping people with his medical knowledge and not eating or drinking any rations for days to ensure that everyone else from the train wreck could survive. Kamina kept on living for as long as possible to ensure Team Gurren could take over the battleship before he died, even encouraging Simon at the very end, hanging on after his mech was ripped to shreds with him inside. He hung on for a little bit longer so that he could assure that everyone else would survive. Corazon had to survive for as long as possible to ensure that Law wouldn't be found by any of the Doflamingo family. As long as he was alive, his devil fruit would be active, ensuring that Law's cries would be silent. Corazon had to hold on for as long as possible to ensure that Law could live on. This pattern's a bit more of a stretch compared to the last one, but hey, maybe I can make this a little tradition. I like this. Writing scripts around a pattern, it's kind of cool.